Welcome to the 25th week after Pentecost. It is Friday, November the 15th, 2024. This is the Manna at the Tap podcast where we actively seek the spiritual nourishment our souls crave. The daily lectionary reading we explore together is the manna designed to nurture our spiritual growth and provide the sustenance our souls need. I'm Gloria, your fellow traveler on this spiritual journey, and together we share insights and interpretations from these readings that enrich our spiritual lives. The lectionary reading takes us to the New Testament book of Colossians, chapter 2, verses 6 to 15. The Apostle Paul had never had the opportunity to visit the community at Colossae. However, he received news of what was taking place from Epaphras, one of the leaders in the community who had been converted to Christianity when Paul lived in Ephesus. Epaphras went to Rome partly to help Paul while he was in prison, but he also saw this as an opportunity to discuss with him what was happening in the community. False teachers had infiltrated the community and taught that to be in a relationship with God, one needed to have mystical visions. The teachers of the false doctrine saw themselves as being more fully with God because of their visionary experiences, and this resulted in some being judged for failing to follow the new teachings. In response, the community was urged by Paul to be rooted in Christ because the fullness of Christ lived in them and they were to continue to live their lives in him. They were baptized into Christ's crucifixion and resurrection, so there was no need to take heed to the self-appointed leaders who sought to undermine the community's faith. The letter will state two related points, one positive and one negative, so as to help the community understand. On the positive side, the community is already fully experiencing a relationship with God because of what God has done for them in Christ. The negative point is verse 8, and they were to see to it that no one takes them captive through an empty and deceptive philosophy based on human tradition rather than according to the standard of Christ. In verse 6 and 7, the community is encouraged to ensure that their lives reflect the reality of being in Christ. The writer uses images the community can relate to. They were to continue to be rooted in Christ. This is an agricultural image of them being rooted like a tree, and they were to be built up in Christ. This was an architectural image of them being built up like a secure structure. This would establish and strengthen their faith, resulting in them overflowing with thankfulness. Living in Christ through faith and overflowing in thankfulness gave the community the energy to have deep roots and foundations stabilizing it so that false teachers would not sway them. The community was comprised of Jews and Gentiles, and Paul reminds them they have all experienced a circumcision in Christ. And that means men, women, no gender difference. They, Gentile or Jew, they all experienced a spiritual circumcision in Christ. And this was not performed by human hands. They were baptized with Christ in baptism, and they were raised with him through faith. This means a resurrection faith is embodied, and there is no embodied faith without the forgiveness of sin. The community is reminded in verse 13 that they were dead in their sins and uncircumcised in their flesh, but it was God who made them alive with and in Christ. This all took place at the cross. And it was at the cross all that stood against them and against us, all that held them and that holds us guilty, all that would strip them and us of the fullness of the embodied life and condemn them and us was taken away and nailed on the cross. Verse 15 of the lectionary reading describes an ancient victory celebration in which prisoners of war were paraded as an act of triumph. The community is encouraged that because their sins are forgiven at the cross, God has not only disarmed all rulers and authorities that would control them and us, but God also publicly humiliated them in a triumphal procession. No one gets to rule us out of God's kingdom.